Mobile hunters, are you looking to make the move to saddle hunting this year? Or maybe you just want to add a few new pieces of gear or upgrade your current saddle gear? If that's the case, then head over to tetherednation.com where they've got all mobile hunters covered. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old timer, Tethered is your one-stop saddle shop. From saddles to ropes, sticks, ascenders, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. I've personally been using their gear for the past 3 seasons now. My base setup consists of the Phantom saddle and the Predator platform. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to use their gear above all else, here's the cliff notes. They're innovative and pushing the mobile hunting forward overall. They cut no corners and prioritize the safety and performance of their gear. They care about the community that they've created, and their gear allows me to hunt free. And above all else, I like to support good people doing good work. If you're interested in upping your mobile hunting game, then head to tetherednation.com. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee, guaranteeing to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker? They're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 234. Today I'm joined by Matt Morett and David Mitchell from the Pennsylvania Game Commission, so stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine on what is, I think, to be the 16th day of June. It's crazy, man, that we're halfway through June already, and I still have trail cameras to get out. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but I don't know. I might try to make a valiant effort this weekend. I think it's going to be a little cooler than the norm, so I'm going to try to, I think, make a run out and see if I can't get the rest of the trail cameras hung. But I'm not going to belabor this up front. We're just going to kind of jump into the podcast. I have on the show today, a really cool show for you guys. Have Matt Morett and David Mitchell on from the Pennsylvania State Game Commission. We touched base and wanted to get together and do a podcast. Of course, license sales in Pennsylvania just went on sale on the 14th. They've got a new automated, I won't say automated, but an online system, which I personally think is super rad. Whenever I buy tags for out of state, any other state that I'm going to, I'm typically buying them online. I don't have to travel somewhere to get it, and they'll mail me my tag or I can print it out or whatever the case is. So it's nice that I can actually do that for my home state of Pennsylvania. You still have to mail in your doe tags, if I'm not mistaken. And they recognize that there's some of those things that they're going to continue to tweak and work on and stuff like that. And that really was the tone and tenor of our conversation. I think by and large, all the different states that I've traveled to and hunted and talking to locals and stuff like that, I can't say that I've ever been somewhere where, people were 100% super stoked with whatever their governing body of wildlife is. That's not to say that they don't do a good job or whatever the case is, but I think it's just kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, I think it's just kind of the way it is. It doesn't matter what sector it is, if it's wildlife or if it's how your state's being governed at a more political level, if you will, dealing with more, commerce policy or whatever the case, health insurance policy, whatever the case is, you're never 100% satisfied with it, right? Because the whole thing is a negotiation. You got to give a little to get a little. And I think that's the one thing people have to remember with the State Game Commission, with the PA State Game Commission. They're negotiating on our behalf to implement things that, the public is asking for. And they're doing, the job that they're kind of set out to do, which is to manage the wildlife across the state. And with that, there's certain things that you can accommodate and there's certain things that you can't, and you follow science and the biology of things and you put in place, acts or limitations on bag limits or extend seasons or shorten seasons or whatever the case is. It's all with an eye toward making sure that the habitat and the wildlife is sustainable, not just for today, but it's sustainable and is a program that can be leveraged into the future for future generations to use. And that was really the kind of the tone and tenor of our conversation. One thing that they're doing that I think is pretty cool, and Matt is kind of heading some of this up, is, I think in a lot of ways, the Game Commission probably hasn't had an arm of communication, a direct communication to hunters, or what hunters might feel like has been a direct enough line of communication, with them. And that's kind of what they're doing now is they've, and I don't know exactly how the structure works there. I forget. And I think we touched on it a little bit in the podcast, but there's kind of segmented into bureaus. And there was one bureau that they've kind of recently split in one arm of it, in layman's terms, is like the marketing arm, if you will, or the communications arm that is really kind of charged with, communicating with hunters and making sure that, people are in the know as to, when things happen, why things happen, and those sorts of things, which to me is really exciting. And, and they fully admit and recognize that this kind of act or this approach is in its infancy within the bureau. And so, a lot of what you have to do, like in any kind of state run, system or whatever the case is like you have to prove out your effectiveness before you get leeway to grow it and fund it further to help do additional things. Right. And so, I think we always kind of have to keep in mind that, no matter what the decision is at that level, at the state level, there's a lot of hoops that have to be gone through. And the more support that they get for certain things from their constituents, the more quickly they can make things happen. So at the end of the day, it's really incumbent upon the constituents to voice their opinions, and provide feedback, provide direction, their likes, their dislikes, et cetera, and be a participant in the process and not expect these guys that are doing the work on our behalf to be mind readers and know what we're doing. I think we also have to take it with a grain of salt and recognize that there are certain things that we just may not have full grasp of. And that is part of, I think, what they're trying to do is unveil some of those things and make sure that there's a line of communication. So there's what seems to be less mystery, if you will. It's not intentional. It's just like anything else. You have to deal with the have to before you can deal with the want to. They want to have as much transparency as possible, but a lot of times, how things are, I don't want to say staffed, but what you have as your priority and what you can feasibly get to within the amount of time that you have to do the job and the multiple jobs you have to do. Those things don't always coincide, and I think we can all appreciate that in our day-to-day jobs. There's things every day that I have to do that I do because I have to. And then there's things I would like to do and should do, but just never get to because I'm one person with a day's worth of work to do. And that's what I can get to. Right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, we are back with another episode of the Truth on the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I'm actually on location. I don't get to do these very often, especially like COVID days really kind of ixnayed my live episodes. It was usually at Harrisburg during the show or at ATA. I would get to see all my buddies, but I'm glad to be out of the house. I'm hanging out at the Pennsylvania State Game Commission office here right around the Reading area with which I'll refer to as my two new friends, Matt Morett and David Mitchell. How you fellas doing?
Good.
I'm doing great.
Can I call you my friends already?
Absolutely.
Are we there? Are we there yet? We traded deer pictures already.
I mean, we share the same passion. We got to be friends.
Right. That's it. Yeah. If not, then we're doing something wrong.
That's right.
But no, we're here to talk about all things Pennsylvania hunting related. Even if you're not from Pennsylvania and you're listening to this, I think you guys will dig it, especially you folks from Michigan, because we share a lot of the same kind of common hunting heritage and things of that nature that kind of cross between the two different states. But before we get diving into a bunch of the specific topics, I always just kind of like to do an icebreaker and just have you guys kind of, say who you are, where you're from, and what you guys do here with the Game Commission. So, Dave, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So my name is Dave Mitchell. I am the Southeast Region Director. I just started down here in April, so I've been here about 2 months. Before that, I was the North Central Region Director for the previous 4 years, and been with the Game Commission for 30 years. Started out as a game warden, and then spent the bulk of my time in land management, and covered the Southeast, so Bucks, Montgomery, Lehigh, Northampton counties, so the area that you're from, Clint.
Yeah.
And it's been a great career. I love hunting, love wildlife, love doing habitat work, and it's just been a great fit. For 30 years, I've been able to get up every day, go to work, and it doesn't seem like I'm going to work. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 30 years, got to be liking it if you're doing it that long.
You don't love hunting. You live hunting.
Right.
That's a rumor.
Well, and you won, if I'm not mistaken, you won an award not too long ago, right? For was that you that won an award? Did I see it on Facebook? Someone won an award for the Southeast region, like habitat.
No, that would have
Management.
been the guys that won the Phillips Award. That would have been Mark Weiss and the crew over at
Okay.
Blue Marsh. They put in
Okay.
a bunch of really good dove fields, and they're also transitioning away from agriculture into all native habitats over there.
Okay.
So they're totally changing that 7,000 acres from, something that looks like everything in the Southeast to a really premier small game
Nice.
hunting area.
Awesome. And so we have Matt Morett. Am I
just-
saying your last name right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's perfect. That's most people butcher, but I just carry Dave's bags.
Is that what you do?
Yes, sir.
Someone's got to.
That's
He
right.
holds me down when we're
There's a
turkey
lot of
hunting.
stuff after 30 years. I'm sure you got a lot of stuff.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Again, Matt Morett. I'm from Central Pennsylvania and been around the hunting circles pretty much all my life. Got started in the outdoor industry because of turkey calling and competed on a national level for a lot of years and worked in the private industry for almost 30 years. And an opportunity came in 2019. I was looking through social media. Felt like a kid, had my face glued to the phone on an airplane or something, and I saw this opportunity for a marketing position at the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I wasn't really looking for a job at the time, and I thought, you know what? How cool would it be to be able to give back to the state that I love and to the sport that has given so much to me in my career? And so I applied. I never applied for a job in my life, never had an interview, never did a resume, and they called me. And then I'm like, oh, man, this is getting real.
It's getting real, yeah.
Long story short, I'm 51 years old this year. It's the best career decision I've ever made. This is by far, and I tell everybody this is the coolest job that I've ever had. And I've had some cool jobs. I mean, I've got to turkey hunt in every state out there, got to deer hunt all over the country for a living. And to come in and be able to promote what the Pennsylvania Game Commission does. And the day that I walked through those doors, April 19th of 2019, I've never looked back, but I've learned something every day. And Dave honestly has been a big help to us in our now bureau. When you've been here 30 years, there's a lot that goes on. And when you want to lay the facts on the table, I called Dave and I said, how did we look at this? And he gives us every angle. And not just, I'm not just saying that because he's here, because there's so many people that help. And we're having fun. We're building a team, a marketing and strategic communications bureau for the Game Commission. So many folks think that nobody likes to hunt at the game. We're not hunters. But
Right.
let me tell you something. There's not too many people inside the walls, no matter if you're in Harrisburg or down here in the Southeast. They're working here because they love what's going on out there. And sometimes it's misunderstood. And the best thing for us is every one of us there are trying to leave it better than we found it when we decided that our time to retire is coming. And I think no matter how much money you make or when you wake up and love your job every day, there's something to be said about that.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point. I think you definitely hit a point in life at some point, at least I know I did, where you start to realize that things, are more important than just the here and now than me going out and killing a big deer or whatever, right? It becomes, what are you kind of leaving behind, or what impact am I having long term? It doesn't mean that I have to see like an impact immediately necessarily, but just knowing that I'm doing my part, right? Whether it's getting a new hunter into hunting, or whether it's, helping support, conservation efforts, whether it's through pledging dollars or showing up to volunteer or whatever the case is. I think that a lot of those things kind of go unsaid, a lot of times. And I think you oftentimes need the perspective of age, to gain that. Cause I'd say in my 30s, 20s and 30s, like I wasn't there necessarily until I got into my later 30s, had my daughter, and then started thinking about what kind of place am I going to leave her?
Right.
And I think that's, the important work that you guys do, beyond just, managing the wildlife and what people know you for, right? As the Game Commission, when they think of Game Commission, the first thing they would think of, right? But it's more than just that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the biggest thing, and this is a tough thing that every day that you try to understand, even for myself, I've been on the outside. I've heard all the things that sound great, but when you try to look at the future, it's tough to look at the future as a hunter. I mean, I'm just being honest. And the word conservation gets thrown around so much out there. And I think I know what the definition is, but I'm still learning every day. But for instance, I'm gonna ask you a question. I asked this the other day, and it floors people, and you may know, but how many birds and mammals do you think the Game Commission is responsible for? If you had to take a wild
If I had to take a wild guess, I would say I was going to say upwards of over 200, but he
yeah, that's bullcrap. You got somebody flashing the answers.
Right.
Everything's scripted, right, Dave?
Right. Everything's scripted. That's what I heard.
Right. He flashed me 410, but I was going with my honest answer, which what hit my mind initially was like up over 200. I was thinking probably like 240, 250.
Right. Most people think it's 25 or 30, and that's the ones you buy a hunting license for. But our responsibility is way bigger than that.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's 480. Actually.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to do, but yeah, I'm not good with sign language.
I got you.
But Clint, when you were talking about that, it's something that, and this is something that affected me a long time ago when I was on a training school, because I got a job with the Game Commission. I liked to hunt. I was 22 years old, and I had all the answers. And I go through the training school, and I suddenly realized how connected everything is. Because as a hunter, all you want is more deer.
Right.
I want more deer. I want more deer. I want more deer. But then you go out and you see the effect that deer have on the forest. And then you realize not only do they have effect on the forest, but they can actually change what the forest is going to look like in the future. So you have these really healthy, productive forests. But if you allow the deer to eat everything, they're going to go from, oak and hickory that are really good for all wildlife to birch and maple, which are not really good for all wildlife. And you might say, well, who cares? My lifetime, it's not going to matter. But like your daughter, when they want to go hunting, like how many turkeys are going to live in that forest?
Right.
Not a lot.
Right.
So it's a really big picture thing. And we have to find that happy medium where everything works together.
Right. Yeah, I think, again, going back to when you have age or experience might be a better way to say it, right? You start to gain some of that perspective where it doesn't matter if it's hunting or something else. You start to quickly realize everything is kind of interconnected in some way, shape, or form, right? It's like, I know as I got older, as I, not to get all hippy dippy, but as I fell even more in love with bow hunting as I got older, it became for more intrinsic reasons than it was just like the chase necessarily, right? It's kind of where I found peace. It found like my stress release from, a stressful job, or if I just needed a place to go to be by myself to think, it provided me all those things, right? And so
don't think too hard. A big buck will walk up underneath.
Well, it's happened. Yeah. Don't fool yourself. It's definitely happened. But it becomes it becomes more important than just the hunt to a degree,
Sure.
right? And in that way, it becomes even more part of the fabric of who you are. Because like hunting, if you really think about it, and you compartmentalize your life to a degree, it's like you're a dad or a husband or wife or a boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever you are, and then you're a dad, and then you're a colleague or a coworker or whatever, right? You have all these kind of sections, right? The one kind of thing that kind of interconnected all those things for me was being in the woods, because it was where I could kind of put everything in the right places,
right?
You know what I mean, to a degree. Which my wife might say that it's the thing that makes me nuts and makes me have problems everywhere else. But
you look at age, and some people might not agree with this, but when you're 20s and 30s, you got blood squirting out of your eyes. Literally, you want to kill everything.
Yeah,
you just think, and as you all of a sudden you realize it's like, man, it's way more than this. It's like I'm sitting in a deer stand in God's creation, and there's a squirrel, and there's some kind of Tweety bird that I don't have no idea what it is, but I'm going to look it up when I get home. What's making that sound? And when you really take it all in like that, there's nothing like it in the world.
No,
I mean, it's just there's just so much more to it. And honestly, for myself, when I heard a turkey gobble, I wanted to call him up. I mean, but now it's just a whole different experience. And what we've learned from every different bureau, like we went out with the foresters, when we were division, and they had and these guys were getting excited about these little stuff that's growing underneath. Nobody's ever paid attention to it, and they're fired up and explaining this. And there's so much that goes on that we don't realize, that the public doesn't realize. I mean, I'm going to say this, and he's going to laugh. But one of the first,
he's already smirking.
Yeah, because they have a bet on when it's coming out, but I'm going to just go ahead and let it rip. So a year ago, last May, he took me to a place in McKean County, Northwest PA, and it's called Latham's Acre. It's an acre that was clear cut in 1950 and then high fenced. There's never been a deer. There's never been anything in there, and whatever was native in 1950 is growing in there, and it's unbelievable. And then you walk outside that acre that's high fenced, and you look, and it looks like you're on Mars, because that's what deer population has done to our woods, where you have all these beautiful flowers and I don't even know what you call them, what are they called? Trillium.
Trilliums, yeah.
And I mean, some kind of dogwood. What's that dogwood? Opposite leaf.
Yeah, opposite leaf dogwood. There's a lot of different types of. It's just a healthy forest,
Right.
in the middle of, an area that had been, and it's not that it's a bad forest. It's just different, and
Right.
it, like I was taught, that's the same place where I had like my epiphany. When I was
It's
22
life-changing.
years old, I was just like, holy cow. The first thing I thought is, geez, people at the Game Commission, like I didn't know that.
Right.
And you can't dispute it because you're standing there looking at it, and it's like,
Right.
these guys might know what they're talking about. And then you kind of open up your mind and you start looking at this stuff, and it's just like,
Because we think, oh, we're having a good acorn crop. Deer, got plenty to eat, but deer eat way more than we can even imagine.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's where, when people, get in their own kind of narrowly focused kind of opinions about the Game Commission or whatever it is, right? It's because they're looking at it out of what they want personally, right? Versus what is in the best interest of the whole totality, right? Like, so it's like what's in the best interest of the deer herd long term, what's in the best interest of the habitat for us long term, and stuff like that. And I think that for me was what kind of changed my perspective on hunting, right? To a degree. Was we had a farm back home, did some habitat work at the farm and stuff like that, food plots, just like your normal stuff or whatever. And then I started kind of just hunting specifically public land, and so I was having to really seek out the areas that were going to have all the things that deer or turkeys or whatever we're going to need to live. And you would quickly see and figure out what had it and what didn't, right? Especially there's a big woods piece in Pennsylvania that I've been scouting. And it's so drastically different than most of the stuff that I hunt in Pennsylvania, because it's almost feels like it's in the Poconos. So I've never been to the Adirondacks in New York. Have some friends who live in that area, but it feels like what they kind of talk about, where there's pockets up there where you feel like there would never be a deer because like the habitat is just so void of what they would want to use, right? But then you hit these little pockets where it's like a clear cut and a burn was done, and it's like, boom, that's all the deer sign, right? And so it really kind of shows you like that balance is really what's required to have, homeostasis between what the forest needs, what the deer need, what the turkeys need, and what all those 478 other things, right, that live there.
Yeah, one of my first trips, we went and looked at a habitat piece that was done, and and we got all done. And another thing that we don't realize is Pennsylvania hunters, the whole project on game lands was funded by the Wild Bird Conservancy, right?
American Bird
Conservancy, and it was for golden wing warblers. But that project helped so many species, including the species that we all love to hunt. And it was, we don't realize the partners out there that help us as hunters as well.
Yeah, and getting back to what you were saying about, those big woods sections, if you're not hunting within a couple 100 yards of active management of some sort, generally up there it's going to be a timber sale or, some timbering work. There's huge chunks of areas that have very, very little deer sign, low populations. But then you get to an area where there's management and there's a lot of deer. Yeah. So if you continually go to the same spot and hope for something, it's probably not going to work.
Well,
but
especially if you can see 500 yards,
right?
I mean, that's one of the issues is we're so traditional. I didn't mean to cut you off, but you hunt, and I grew up like this. My grandpa hunted the same tree his whole end of his hunting career. He'd go to the same spot every day, opening day. If he'd go the first Saturday, he'd go to the same spot, and eventually he didn't see the deer he did it when he first went there. Well, things change. I mean, look at us. You go back to the town you grew up in.
Looks different.
The habitat changes.
And that's what I always try to tell people, like, if I'll get a message, someone asking me about something, because, I'm sure I'll get some after this one, right? Like, Pennsylvania, I haven't seen deer on a piece of public land in 20 years or whatever. It's like I've gotten those messages in the past. And what I always tell them is that if exactly what you just said, right? It's like the forest is an ever changing thing. It doesn't stay in traction, right? It's going to evolve. Right. And so you have to think about it through, if you're deer hunting specifically, right, you have to think about it through the deer's lens of like, what is it gaining from that wherever you're at? Why are they there? And then think about why they're not there. Is it because you were hunting the edge of a clear cut when it was 2, 3, 4 years old, when it was good browse and good bedding? Yeah. Going to see deer, especially if you're hanging out along the edge of it. You probably saw a lot of deer. Year 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's pretty thick now, not real great for bedding. The food's up above their head, right? It's like, so now it's like time to shift and move off and figure out where their deer went. They're still there, They just went somewhere else. And it's your job as the hunter to hunt them, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I think about it, right? And it's not I don't think it's a mean-spirited thing, but it's like you got to be willing to evolve as a hunter to a degree, to have success consistently.
I relate it to human beings. If you have a favorite restaurant that you went to for 10 years and it closes down, and you go find another favorite restaurant in an opposite town, you're going to change your habits.
That's
It's
just
the
it.
same exact thing that a deer's going to do.
Yeah.
Or a
Right,
turkey or anything,
Yeah.
squirrels, grouse, whatever.
And to speak to that, you just have to be smart too. The second week of deer season, like Matt came up and we hunted a section of public land up in north central Pennsylvania last year, second week of rifle season. A lot of deer signed up on the top where there were clear cuts and active management, but the deer really weren't up there because that's where people could park.
Pressure.
And pressure. So those deer bailed off those tops. So we bailed off the top, got the wind right, got down a couple benches, and
No, he's sugarcoating it. That was as close to the devil. I think I might have saw the devil.
was that before or after those nice bucks came by?
Well, they kind of eased the pain, but that was one of. I mean, I felt like I was hunting in New Mexico.
Right.
I mean, I didn't. Except I could breathe because we weren't that.
Right. You were at 8,000 foot or 12,000
But we were in
foot.
some rough country. But guess what? Second week of buck season, and
You're going to be in rough country.
saw what, $6 that day?
Allegedly. I don't know. I can't believe that because there's no way there's $6 left on public land in Pennsylvania.
I saw $6.
Just so everyone out there knows that was a little bit of sarcasm if you didn't pick up on it. A little game commission.
I saw
sarcasm.
$6, and I had been fortunate and found one in archery season, so I was throwing rocks at him. So
Right.
it was pretty fun.
We were trying to fill Matt's doe tag. I was tagged out, and a friend of ours who will remain nameless might have missed one of those bucks
Oh,
at
yeah.
relatively close range with a scope
No,
270.
Steve Ferrari, I didn't mention your name, David.
now, did you cut it? Now, did you cut his shirt tail off? That's the question.
No,
right?
because he already tried to kill me going in there. I didn't want him to kill me coming out.
Right. There you go.
But it goes to show that there are deer on public land. You just have to go to where they are when you want to hunt them.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that because like I said, we have a family farm still. We have two actually. My dad has a piece and my father-in-law has a piece, and so we got plenty of land back in Bedford County to hunt if I wanted to go back there. But the fact of the matter was like public was just really appealing to me because I had larger boundaries
Mm-hmm.
and I could actively go hunt because I had a deer. People listen to this podcast heard me tell this story 100 times, but there was a deer that I had patterned pretty well on the farm. I knew what his deal was. Told my father-in-law, I was like, I had 4 encounters with him at the end of the I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2016 or something like that. Right after Christmas, late season, had 4 encounters with him. He just was slightly out of range. And I was like, I got this guy's number. Glassed him in a field, watched him come in, saw what wind he was using. I was like, man, he is dead opening day if I get the right conditions. Got the right conditions set up. Sure enough, he showed up. I didn't expect him to be bachelored up. He came in with like 2 other bucks. One got up underneath me and winded me. He stayed in like a little bit of brush. I needed like 3 more yards and he would have got stuck. And it was right then and there because I knew where he was bedded. I knew he was bedded on the neighbors on this creek bottom, right? And I just couldn't get over there. I didn't have permission to hunt it. And so that was right then and there. I was like, all right, you know what? I knew where that deer was for 2 years and I couldn't go kill him because he was bedded on the neighbors. So I fixed that by just going and hunting public where I have larger boundaries and I can go hunt that deer that when I know he's there. And I'm in an area that typically people would say wouldn't be good for bigger deer, right? Truth be told, last year, and I've said this on the podcast, it's like I had the best deer in Pennsylvania in my life last year to hunt and multiple. I had probably 4 deer that were between 130 and 160
Oh, wow.
last year, all on public land.
If you look at some of the research that we've done, in conjunction with Penn State, the age class of our bucks, and that research is being done in north central Pennsylvania, but our age class will rival that of all the places that you were talking about,
Mhm.
Missouri, Iowa, Kansas.
Mhm.
It's there.
And the fact that we have 900,000 hunters,
Yeah.
which none of those states have to deal with. That's
No.
one of the things that, when we do hear from the public, it's like, why don't you do it like, especially turkey season, like, why don't you do it like so-and-so or so-and-so? What's Ohio? Oh, we have 240+ thousand turkey hunters. Ohio only has 300,000 licensed hunters.
Right.
That's the whole other landscape of the management program that the Game Commission has, we have to take into consideration is we're pushing 1 million hunters.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we still have 5, 6, 7-year-old bucks out there to hunt.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is, but the difference is they're not as visible. Like you go out to Iowa, you can darn near find every buck that's out there in the summer by glassing some bean fields.
Yeah.
When you're in Pike County or Tioga County, unless you're in that broken farm country, when you're in those big chunks of forest, there are no bean fields to glass.
Yeah.
They're not right next to a road. So you got to figure out how you're going to get back in 3 miles and then figure out where's that deer feeding in July and August
Yep.
to see what's there. And,
Yeah.
Plus, total anecdotally, that's a new word I learned.
There you go.
Our deer are smarter. I mean, just
Hey,
bottom line. I
ain't gonna lie, man.
The pressure that we put on them makes our deer cagier.
And you get a 3-year-old deer. You get a 3-year-old deer in Pennsylvania. He knows the game. He's been well educated.
Sure.
In his 3 years. You know, I was just actually talking to a buddy of mine about that on a previous podcast where we were just kind of talking about the fact that, you know, especially whenever it comes to using the wind, we were talking about using the wind specifically, and you know how, you know, it takes us, you know, however many years as a hunter till you really start to understand wind and thermals. And some guys do it more quickly than others. And I basically said to him, it was really probably 2-3 years ago for me where it finally clicked, and I didn't have to think about my prevailing and my thermals any longer. I could just get to a spot and go, all right, my prevailing is this. This is what time of day it is. This is, you know, the side of this ridge I'm on. This is what the thermals are probably going to do around this time. And I can set up for it, right? And don't have to analyze it too much. And I was like, a deer is doing that like this because he's lives it every day, right? He's a 3-year-old deer. It's like you might get a 3-year-old that's maybe uses a wrong wind once or twice. You know, he doesn't have to do it too often to figure out he shouldn't do it anymore, right? I was like, but you get those 4 and 5-year-old bucks, they're not using a wrong wind. Like if they're tailwinding something, there's a reason they're tailwinding something, right?
There's only
it's
a couple
like,
things that are going to make him make a mistake, and one's food, and the other one is
ladies. Yep, that's it.
But the key is you have to find a spot where he thinks he has the wind, but he doesn't have it. And those are few and far between. But when you can find one that works, when I think back of all the, you know, bucks that I've killed, a lot of them, you know, deer were killed on a spot where he should have had the wind, but he almost had it.
Or he had to give up the wind to make it through this little obstacle or whatever that he couldn't get around or whatever, right? It's like all those critical little things. But let's dive into like something that people might want to say is controversial or whatever, because I think in part, you know, I won't say I'll use your word, anecdotally. Right, there you go.
I get told that a lot. Like, nope, that's anecdotal. Because one thing about the biology field, they have more data. Like you don't want to go battle a biologist because he's not going to tell you.
He's going to show you.
If it's a definite, he's going to show you the information and the data that's definite.
Right. Yeah. So I'll say,
or she,
anecdotally, you know, I'm a fan of the antler point restrictions, just because where I grew up, you didn't see a lot of rack bucks just in general, right? The biggest one I shot a 6-point when I was probably like 15. And that was the biggest deer I'd ever shot back home.
Drive it around for a week.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, now my uncle shot a 7-point, same out of my spot, like the next day or whatever. That was the biggest deer I'd ever seen, you know, on our property or whatever. And now, you know, just anecdotally again, from running trail cameras and being a hunter and being in the woods a lot and glassing when I have the chance to, and there's an area that I can glass and stuff like that, I'm seeing more big deer or bigger deer consistently than I've ever seen. And it's really been, especially I think it's like the past couple years, like I've really seen, I don't know what it was, but like it seems like the past couple years, even in areas where you would think there aren't good deer, right? Like I know when you get out to the Alleghenies and stuff like that, I have some buddies that hunt out there. You know, my one buddy killed a giant out there this year, right? And he shows me trail camera pictures, and he has giants on camera every year, right? And that's just rugged country, get age on them so they can get big. But I'm in an area that's pretty suburban, so the biggest block of public might be 2,000 acres roughly, right? And a lot of them are maybe 300 acres, 400 acres, 500 acres, whatever the case is. And I'm still seeing deer that in most states I would pull my bow back on, unless I was in one of those Iowa or Kansas or whatever. But even in some of those states, this past year, the one, like it would have got shot in any one of those states, you know? And I'm a firm believer that I think like, you know, requiring or having antler point restrictions has given us an opportunity for people who want to chase bigger deer, gives them the opportunity to do that in Pennsylvania.
I think the education that it's created alone, you know, because when I was a kid, everybody thought it was either born a spike or a 10-point. They didn't know it needed birthdays to get big and old.
Right.
I mean, I can't tell you how many bucks. Even today, sometimes somebody goes, "Hey, look how old he is. He has a gray face, but he weighs 120 pounds." And it's just it. I'm not saying that buck can't be old, but most likely it's a 1.5-year old buck. I mean,
Right.
and from my perspective, and I'll let Dave carry on because he's been through this whole deal back when Gary Alt needed bulletproof vest to go talk about
That's
what's
crazy.
going on, and not only that, it's just healthier for our deer herd to have that age structure.
Yeah,
It is, and I believe there's a couple things at play there. One of them is we do have antler point restrictions, but I think over time people have also started to embrace the idea of hunting, bigger, older, more mature bucks. So they're even passing deer that are 6-pointers or 7-pointers, or maybe they're 2 years old, hoping to hold out for a bigger deer. And some of that comes from the point of like, I hate when people give trophy hunting a bad name, because it's not necessarily about the trophy. It's more about your challenge to yourself.
right.
So, someone like you who puts a lot of time in scouts all the time, you could probably go out and kill a 6-point in just a few sets. So to extend your season, to extend your time in the woods, you may pick a goal of whatever that may be, whether it's the age or the size of the deer, just to extend your time so you can go sit in a tree stand or in your saddle and decompress and relax and enjoy nature. And it gives you that reason to be out there. So I think a lot more people have started looking at that too. And we're a 1-buck state, so you can only kill 1 buck. And, if you look at the opportunities that are afforded to us now, we have more time to hunt. It goes longer into the rut. And
I love that too.
it's a great thing. And Matt killed his buck that extended week this year. And, so we have more opportunity. So it allows you to be a little bit more selective. And in doing that, all those bucks that aren't getting killed at 1 or 2 or 3 years old get a chance to turn into 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds. And some of them are going to grow really big racks.
But if a 5 or 6 point is what you want, there's
nothing wrong
let
with
it
that.
rip. There's not a thing wrong with
That's
that.
just it. I'm, whatever it is that gets your rocks off, I'm all for it, but I do agree. I think, there's been a lot of, I think people understanding the value of having a balanced herd in terms of age structure. Like it does, not only do you see bigger deer, more mature deer, and I don't want people to think it's all about big deer, because it's not necessarily what it's all about. But when you have that balance, right, you start getting deer doing deer things, which is to me is like the end all be all, right? Because there was a hunt I did in Ohio, that it was one of the first times that I had truly seen deer do deer things, and their balance of their numbers in the area I was at was like actually pretty good. The age structure was good, to where there was going to be some competition for does, and so there was some sparring, there was some ripping up of trees. It was just like the normal rut activity you would watch on like a TV show somewhere. It's like I saw all of it. Cool thing is now is like I'm seeing it here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like I'm getting that balance now to where like the numbers are a little bit better, the age structure is a little bit better, like where the deer are having to compete a little bit for breeding rights or to lay down sign or whatever the case is. And that to me is that's exciting.
Let me shift gears on what you just said there for a second, because we're facing it right now with turkeys. Same thing, and I'm not going to get way in the weeds on it, but like right now we've had 3, 4, 5 years of hatches and recruitment that's not been real good because of weather, mainly cold, wet springs. So you're dealing with older gobblers. So if you don't have any young gobblers, any 2-year-olds out there showing their oats, that 4-year-old gobbler is a tough dude. He's going to be tough to call up. He's going to be with those hens.
They don't want to be a TV star.
No, they don't want to be. They're not kamikazes. I was talking to a guy this morning. He goes, "Yeah, I don't know what happened. I had my kid out, and there was some turkeys gobbling, and one came up there strutting. He poked up over the hill, and he just walked by at 40 yards. I'm like, it's a drive-by. He's gotten his butt whooped. He's a younger subordinate gobbler, probably, maybe not even younger. He's not saying a word. He's trying to go in there and, slick one of those hens out of there and get out of there before the big boy shows up. And the same is in the deer world. When you have that competition, and weather can help too, when you have some colder weather during that month, when you experience the rut, it's like that magical. There's a couple days in there that are just for any bow hunter or deer hunter is magical.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, now would you say, because I know, a lot of the turkey hunters I talked to this year, and this was not just in Pennsylvania, but definitely in PA, they had a rough year where they were just like had a hard time getting them to come in, and it was just like guy after guy. A couple of them who I know are really good turkey hunters just struggled. I'm a terrible turkey hunter. I'm the first one to admit it. I basically take the gun and walk and end up deer scouting. That's what I end up.
You're giving it a try. That's all that counts.
That's what I end up doing. But is there anything to that as far as like, some of the struggles we've had with like the hatch or the recruitment or whatever kind of playing into like this year was a tough year because you don't have that balance that you typically would have.
It does make it tougher. I mean, here's the bottom line, in my opinion, as a hunter. When there's not a lot of 2-year-olds, you got to pack your lunch because you got your work cut out for you. I mean, those hens are getting bred. They're getting bred by more mature birds, and as a rule, is those hens and gobblers get together, you're not going to pull them away from them.
Right. And nothing like the real thing.
Right. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And when you have good hatches, like this year, a lot of the state is, we're in our 17-year cicada.
Yeah.
This year, like in our country, and it's deafening right now. The turkeys that I saw crops just full of cicadas, and it's keeping the nest predators out of the nest. And we should have a great hatch. Weather's been perfect for that. So 2 years from now, it might be we might rival some of those states that you hear about hearing, 15, 20 gobblers a morning. I can tell you firsthand, traveling the country like Alabama, when it's recruitment's tough and you're dealing with old turkeys, they're not easy. And that's, in my opinion, that's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, if we went out there and yelped and a turkey ran into us every time we yelped, it wouldn't be any fun. And that's the other thing. I mean, just because it worked one time doesn't mean it's going to work forever. And that's the beauty of turkey hunting. We are below goal, in population, and we're working real hard to get back there. This year was implemented in the fall season, and it's been a little controversial. We've been one of the states that has still allowed rifles for fall turkey season. Yeah. And when you look at the statistics, the only way to control the turkey population biologically is to control the hens.
Right.
We can shoot the gobblers. We're in good shape in the spring. All those hens, the hens that are going to nest and have young ones are going to be able to be bred. That's why our season's in, after breeding. I mean, peak breeding season. So we get all those hens to the nest that are going to have a nest. And that's another thing folks don't realize. Not every hen is a mama hen. Right. Especially the jennies, even some of the adults, they don't all have that mother instinct. So, we have a lot of things going in our favor. There's a lot of states following our model. One of the biggest things we hear it all the time, and I've been on that side of the coin, our season's way too late. What is the date today? June 14th?
14th, yeah.
Yeah, or, mid-June. I heard turkey gobble this morning. Gobbled like his brains out. And, I mean...
Right.
But getting back to your question,
I got way off tangent.
That's okay. Turkeys. I think a lot of it depends on what area of the state you're hunting. Some areas, populations are down. Some areas they're not. So southwestern, some parts of western PA have really good turkey numbers, and because of that, guys are having some really good successful hunts. Some of the areas here in eastern Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, the numbers are not as high as they were 4, 5, 6 years ago. Less turkeys makes for tougher hunting. Yeah. So I think some of that depends.
What I love though is that you guys are, you're taking an active role in trying to solve things, and by and large, like you take heat for it too. You know what I mean? Like,
you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. That's.
But I've always said it's like if you're not pissing some people off, then you're not trying. You're probably not doing a good job, right? It's like, and that's kind of how I look at it, right? And because you guys, in my mind, have made some decisions and put some things forward that I'm personally a fan of, that has ruffled the feathers certainly of like the cultural heritage folks, right, of Pennsylvania, right? And I get where they're coming from. It's let's just talk about Sunday hunting, for example, right? Like I never in my wildest dreams would have thought a hunter would want fewer days to hunt. So my mind was blown whenever I saw it get as much resistance as it got. I guess, can you talk a little bit about just like that experience, the resistance, and like, what was the root of it? Or did you ever get to the root of what the resistance was? And like, how do we kind of solve it?
Well, I think with anything, anytime there's change, people are afraid of what could happen. So I'm not, some of the hunters, I think, most of our hunters were in favor of Sunday hunting, but a lot of the landowners, they don't know, like, is our property going to be overrun? And like all those things that are pretty much unfounded. Last year was not an issue. Like we did not run into a whole lot of problems of having those landowner hunter conflicts on Sunday. So it's just that fear of the unknown, I think, is what a lot of the problems stem from. And after we have a few years of having Sunday hunting, I'm hopeful that we can go to where the agency can regulate all Sundays, not just the 3 that we have, but that would take legislative action to remove the prohibition on it. So I believe that's just, I remember the first time I shot a deer, like I was in Montana and I killed a deer on Sunday, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen? Well,
you thought you were poaching.
Yeah, nothing happened because everybody in Montana hunts 7 days a week, but it was just my Pennsylvania brain. It was like hard to fathom that I'm out here actually hunting on a Sunday.
I felt like that in Pennsylvania this year when I got to get in a tree stand on a Sunday in bow season. I'm like, this isn't right, because we're just so used to it.
I had to check multiple times to make sure it was the right, like, you know what I mean? Because
The
I
right
was
Sunday.
like, I don't want to be out here and like, arrow a deer and then be taking it back in my kayak, and then all of a sudden someone's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, I'm hunting. Someone's said I can hunt today. And they're like, wrong one, bud. It was not what I wanted to hear, So I was like incessantly checking, going back to the website, looking at my phone, like, okay, it's the right day. I'm pretty sure, and that was actually, I had a great encounter, and I screwed the pooch on one. I've talked about that already.
I did the same thing. My goal was like, if I told myself if a legal buck comes in the first Sunday, I'm going to try to have some back straps on the grill, but I sailed one right over one's back. But I'm glad I did, because when I moved to Iowa, I told you I lived in Iowa.
Yeah.
I get out there, and here's a guy from Pennsylvania that the biggest deer I've ever seen on the hoof is probably 120 inches, and that was world record to me. And I'm seeing these farmers have these giants laying in the wood pile, and this is before juries and Lee and Tiff. This is back in the early '90s when, and one old timer said, "You want to know how to kill a 180?" I'm all ears.
Right.
I'm 22 years old. I said, "Heck yeah!" He's like, "You got to pass up 150s," and he's right. I mean, just like you said, you shot your biggest deer, and then a couple days later, your uncle killed a bigger one. Well, that's how it works. I mean, and but I think getting to Sundays or anything, change is so tough in Pennsylvania. We're such a traditional state.
We are.
I mean, look at today, opening of hunting license sales.
Yep.
People, and we're in a new system.
Yep.
So there's some kinks, and we're working around the clock to get things fixed. But people were lined up here. They were lined up in Harrisburg. They were lined up at their favorite hunting store when hunting license going on sale. There's not that many people that are going to hunt groundhogs tonight.
Heck, there were people online last night at midnight buying their hunting licenses.
But it's just that opening, things are open, and we want that buzz. We love that. I mean, you cut any of our arms in here right now, and a PA hunter blood's going to run out of them. Because that's what and I've been able to travel the country and hunt all over the place. And before I don't even have to ask another Pennsylvanian where they're from when they start talking, because you can just feel that PA tradition as a hunter. Yeah,
yeah. No, I got on this morning before work and got all my tags and got my preference point for an elk tag, and did everything I needed to do, and it took me one shot and I was good. I went. You can use me as like the test example, right? I went through and did what I needed to do, and it went off without a hitch. I got my tags, and I'm good to go. I can print out the ones I can print out. The ones that have to go through the fulfillment center, PDF told me which ones will be mailed to me, and then we'll be good to go. But I think that's really exciting, the elk aspect of things, where like we're boosting the numbers a little bit, right, this year as far as like the opportunities, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this year for the first time, there's bull elk tags in the late season. So all 3 seasons, archery, the general season, and the late season, all have bull hunting opportunities. And we also increased the number of overall tags as well.
20 more bull tags this year.
Yeah, we've been able to, and I'll speak to this because
this is close to your heart.
Oh my God, I love elk. I cannot wait for September. I'm going to Wyoming.
Oh man. Yeah. I've got to do it once. I went to Montana, and it's like, I'm still itching to get back. You said you talked to a Pennsylvania hunter, and it's like that hunting, that heritage just pours out. I have such a hard time giving up my whitetail hunt that I can't just, because my wife's basically like, you can do one or the other essentially, right? Because it's like I'm gone for a while and whatever.
I'd never hunt whitetails again.
Oh man, I can't.
See,
Like, I
I'm the
can't.
opposite. I won't even tell you my nickname for elk, and I've been able to hunt elk a lot of places. I'm with you. I love whitetails.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Where it's like I love the elk hunt, and I can't wait to go do it again. But like, there's just something about seeing a big Iowa buck or like a big PA buck or a Kansas buck or Ohio. Like, I don't care where it's at. You know what I mean? It just doing the hunting the rut somewhere. Put me in a tree anytime the first 2 weeks of November, and I'm happy as can be.
I go to Zoo America and see a white-tailed deer and
I don't
dumb
know,
as a box of
man.
rocks, and it gets me fired up.
I see him driving down the road. My wife gets so mad because I'll just see like a doe along the road, be like, deer, you know, and I'll point and I'll take my eyes off the road and scope it out. She gets so mad at me, but I can't not see a deer and like call it out and get
Right.
all excited about it.
I don't know, when that big old bull's just screaming and snot's running out his nose and his eyes are rolled back in his head and that big
And he's peeing all over
he's
his legs.
peeing all over
Yeah, that's-
himself and that big old rack's back there. and
Sounds
he's-
like me
oh.
Saturdays. No, I'm just kidding.
But so now, and one of the reasons that we've been able to increase our elk tags is we've changed the way that we count elk.
Mhm.
So the last 2 years, we've been able to fly the elk range, and there's a certain number of elk out there with radio collars on. So we know where those elk are, and that airplane has a really high definition camera on it. So it's recording everything it sees, and then they're classifying them as, bulls, cows. But we can tell if they saw our collared elk or not. So then they use a statistical formula to determine how many elk are out there. And because of that, we were able to come up with a number that, there's more elk on the landscape than we believed. And because there's more elk out there, in turn, we can have more elk tags,
Right.
which was really exciting because our people like elk.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting because I mean, people that aren't from Pennsylvania, if they don't know, and you want to see giants, right? It's like people will talk about New Mexico, right, for giant elk, or just name any whatever Western state you want to name, and you want to see truly giant elk. Go to Benezet and hang out late August, early September, and just stay in a camper for a couple of days and listen to them rip, and just and go try to catch up with one or two of them and see them, and you will walk away seeing some Magnum elk that you'd be hard pressed to find anywhere else.
Yeah. We had the 6th biggest elk ever killed in North America killed last year.
Jeez, what was it? What did it score?
455.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, 450. It was giant bull.
We'll talk about the elk range though, Dave, because we're getting a lot of people saying, "Hey, why can't elk be here? Why can't we get elk over here?" And just talk about why our elk range is where it's at.
Our elk range is in north central Pennsylvania, so it is north of Route 80, south of Route 6, and then it would be west of Route 287 and east of 219. And the reason that that's picked is it's 70% public lands. One of the problems we have with elk is when they get on private property. So imagine a half dozen deer in a cornfield. The farmer doesn't like it, but it's not the end of the world. Now put a half dozen elk in a cornfield, like they just decimate.
It's like putting a half dozen cows in a cornfield.
It's exactly what it's like. So, and that's where we run into problems, that elk human conflict. So, people always say, "Oh, we could put them in the Poconos, or we could put them in the Allegheny National Forest, or we could put them down in, Bedford County." But what you would end up doing is you would have that huge landowner conflict, and we don't want to do that. We already run into issues with them when they get to the edges of their range. Like as they're moving southeast there, we have a lot of crop damage issues. Same thing as the southwestern part of their range. They get down into that agriculture, big woods interface, and they cause a lot of problems. So the reason that the elk range is picked where it is because the large amount of public land where we can hopefully keep those elk away from trouble,
And
essentially.
it's remote too. The road system. I mean,
It's wilderness-like.
Yeah,
It's
we put them around
wilderness-like, yeah.
Harrisburg. People would be hitting elk with cars, and it wouldn't be a good deal.
Yeah,
Right.
it really wouldn't be. So
Yeah. The what's the carrying capacity of that area for a herd number, roughly?
that is something that I do not know. I know Jeremy Banfield, our elk biologist, told me that he had always hoped to double the elk herd in his.
What's it at now?
It depends on what the numbers are, but I would say it's probably 14 to 1600, something like that. When he started,
I love you putting him on the spot right here. This is making me feel good.
When he started, I think it was under 1,000. So,
Wow.
I believe his goal was always to have like maybe around 2,000 elk. But a lot of it just depends on, like I said, we issued more tags this year because we had a lot of, human elk conflicts.
Right.
And they're doing a lot of research up there because I'm not sure that anybody really knows what the carrying capacity is. We're doing some browsing studies. They're doing some calf recruitment studies. So it's a lot of stuff going on with Pennsylvania elk right now.
Right.
And hopefully by the time all that research is done, we'll have some better answers for you.
Right. And how much will they travel in like a given year, right? Because aren't they? And correct me if I'm wrong. Like they're not migratory, right? But they're
so they do have summer and winter ranges. It's just not as drastic as out west where they might move, 100
mountain
miles.
ranges.
Yeah.
Right.
But they'll have, the elk will be up on top of the Quahana Plateau in the summer and early fall, and then they'll go down into the stream bottoms to winter in the winter. So some of those movements might be, 10 or 15 miles. Some of the bulls, travel great distances. Some of our radio collared bulls, they'll you'll have one all the way down on like the southwestern corner of the range, like right above Route 80, and he'll go and travel up to Benezet to rut.
Okay.
So, they do make those movements.
Like a whitetail would, but just a larger.
Yeah.
Right.
The one bull, a really big bull, was killed for crop damage a year ago, and he was killed just above Route 80 in Center County, like just off the Milesburg exit, and he would rut every year on the other side of the river over in Pottersdale. So I don't know what that distance is, but probably 20 miles or something like that between his rutting grounds and where he spent the rest of the time. So,
right.
They're big. I mean, they can travel. Like if you've hunted elk, you bounce one and you bounce a buck, and he might run 300 yards and circle back around to his bedroom. You bounce an elk, and the last thing you see is him going over to the next drainage, and he's still running.
Or
Still
the state line.
Or the state, yeah.
Yeah. And I did have the experience that you were describing. My only trip out to Montana, a buddy of mine who's from Bedford moved out there and went to college. I guess at Montana State is what it was, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And my cousin and my other friend will always go out and hunt with them every year, and they invited me to go out, and I finally was able to make the trip. And we were hunting together, and we were there for 2 weeks, and I hunted a wallow for a couple of days, and then we split up, and I was hunting this these drainages down to this big kind of like open like valley or whatever. We were all going to meet there at the end of the day or whatever, and I saw what in my mind was a big bull. It was a 6x6. I don't know how I can't score a bull like I can a whitetail. You know what I mean? It's like I have no clue. I just saw like a lot of bone, and I was happy to try to kill it. And we saw each other about the same time, and he took off, and that was it, right? And so we were hunting this other mountain range, and my buddy Luke, and he and I were hunting together, and my cousin and our other friend were hunting together, and they went on the other side of this range, and we took the other side of it. And we're just kind of gonna hunt around the whole thing, and then kind of meet up in like midday or whatever. And we got down where we were kind of glassing and just kind of listening because it had this big ravine and this big drop off, and he'd hunted this area before, and he's like, usually they like to hang in this particular area, right? So we're listening, and we can hear like one bull. It sounds like the herd bull ripping down in this ravine. Clearly sounds like the herd bull. And then there was another bull that was kind of like off to our left, and there was another bull that was kind of like off to our right. They kind of felt and sounded like they were satellite bulls, right? And I didn't care what I was going to shoot. Didn't matter to me. I wasn't there for the biggest, And the one to the left, like he clearly must have got his butt kicked at some point because we called, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm out of here, dude. Like no chance." The one that was over here to our right, like he would come in, get to about like 60 yards or so, and then he would back off, and we would cow call to him a little bit, and he would come in about 60 yards and like bugle, and he would back off. He just wouldn't break like this zone, and like you could kind of tell it's like he probably has been whooped once, maybe not that bad, you know what I mean? Because he still wants to play the game, but he's
doing drive-by.
He's doing drive-by.
That's exactly
Right.
what he's doing.
So what we did was he was like, what we're going to do? He's like, I'm going to call. And when he bugles, he's like, he can't hear. We're going to run. He's like, and we're just going to start running toward him. I was like, all right. So he would call, he would bugle. While he was bugling, we would run. And we counted like his bugle, like how long. It was like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, stop. Right. So he basically had like a 3 to 4 Mississippi to run before his bugle would stop. So we'd run and we'd do it again. And we finally broke like his comfort zone. We must have got just far enough away from that herd bull to where all of a sudden it sounded like he was probably like 50-ish, coming on maybe 40 yards, a bunch of dark timber, so we couldn't really see. But we broke the barrier because now he was getting closer. We could hear him, right? My buddy Luke looks at me. He's like, hey, I'm going to walk up on the side of the mountain here. He's like, I'm going to call up there and try to pull him by you broadside so you get a clean shot. And I was like, okay. So I'm standing there looking, and he goes to move, and I just grabbed him like, dude, hold on. He's like, what? I'm like, he's right there. I just saw like antlers coming through like the dark timber. And it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. Like, I'd never seen an animal that big, that close
it's like
before.
a pickup truck with horns.
Oh, yeah. It's like, it
Antlers.
looks like a dinosaur,
Sorry.
you know? And so as he's getting closer, like, he's not stopping. He's just walking toward us, right? And I'm like, so we were behind this down tree. There was a limb between he and I. He was standing here, and I was standing here. That bull gets to about 25 yards. We were both at full draw. And it's like, if he turned that way, he had the shot. If he turned this way, I had the shot. At like 25 yards, he just rips his head back. Just like, and it just goes straight through your chest, like nothing I'd ever felt before. And he turned his way, and he ended up sticking him right through the heart. He walked 40 yards, piled up, and that was it.
So
that
you
was
got to
it.
be a part of it then.
Oh yeah, it was unreal. I mean, I wish I would have released the arrow, of course, right? But it was just unreal to kind of have that big of an animal just scream in my face, you know, and then be able to harvest him. And it was one of the best days on the mountain, man. And I would love to be able to do this in Pennsylvania. I buy a point every year, and eventually I'll start getting the application for the license, and hopefully, you know, at some point in my life, get one. But he didn't bring a headlamp or a pack or anything. So I had like a headlamp, and I had a pack, and he was like, well, let's take shoulder and a quarter off of him. And then it was supposed to get cold that night. He's like, we'll let him here. We'll come back in the morning. Hopefully bears or nothing get into him or whatever. And then we'll come back and take care of him in the morning. I was like, all right. So we use my pack. I've got a shoulder on my shoulder. He's got my pack with a quarter in it, and it snowed, right? So we're walking through snow, and it's like a 2-mile walk back to like where the truck was parked. I'm like, you got a headlamp? He's like, no. So I was the only one with the headlamp. So I'm leading, and my headlamp dies. Like, we were like 2 feet from the bull at this point. So we had a full 2-mile walk back through that with like just carrying this bloody.
And you're in grizzly country?
We weren't in grizzly country.
Okay.
No. We were in southern Montana, near Dillon is where we were at. But still, I wanted to kill him because it was like a brutal walk back, and it would have been rough just like with light in general. But add the snow and the elevation, it was miserable. I was like, if we get back and don't die, I'm going to kill you. You know, it was like. But we went back the next day, and me, my cousin, my buddy, and then my buddy Luke, who shot the bull. We basically just spent the entire day there, and took care of the bull, butchered him, made a little fire, roasted some backstrap on a stick, pulled off some bark off the tree, laid down, took a nap. You know, made a whole day out of it. And it was like by far one of the best experiences I've ever had in the timber, just experiencing that with like a couple good friends, you know, and living off the land. At least for that brief moment, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be.
All this aside, that's what hunting's all about.
That's it.
When you can go and have a good time with your buddies and just take it all in like that.
Yeah.
Nothing better than it. I mean, ever. I mean, you'll remember that till they put you under dirt. I mean, that's what it's all about.
100%. And I hope I can do something like that here at some point. You know, that's whether it's elk or, I mean, in a smaller way, it's the same thing whenever killing deer around here. You know, it's like my buddy Wilson, shout out to him. He just moved to Idaho. Lucky SOB. You know, he's out there in elk country, but he was always my first phone call. You know, when something happened, and you know, he would help me get something out if I needed to, or if I didn't need help, I'd just call him to let him know what was going on. Or my drive back from hunting, I would call him, and that's like what hunting is that kind of part of it. It's that fabric, and we have that in spades in Pennsylvania. You know, and that's what it just makes me excited that the hunting's it seems like it's just getting better and better every year.
It is. It's amazing. One thing I want to say about elk, and you said it like one day, but here's the thing about elk. You want to know how to draw tag in Pennsylvania?
How's that?
You got to put in.
Got to put in, yeah.
And a lot of people think that they can't do it, but I mean, if you want to hit Powerball, you got to play Powerball. I mean, nobody ever hit Powerball that didn't buy a ticket, and I'm not saying that for any more reasons than all you got to do is you got to put in for the draw if you want to hunt elk, and it's pretty simple. I mean,
And if you get an elk tag, then you just rearrange your other plans if you can.
Yeah, I know. It's like, and I keep going back to the whitetail thing because it's like, you know, because this year I'd already had Kansas planned. Next year I think is going to be more of my buddy's drawing Iowa next year, and I won't be able to draw till the year after. So I think next year will probably be like my travel trip will probably be to Missouri or Nebraska. As long as it's not like a draw state, I'll probably those years buy my elk application or buy the tag or try to buy the tag. That way, if I get it, then I don't have like another tag that I've already like bought and paid for, something to more do those, the elk thing whenever I am doing an over the counter hunt somewhere.
Right.
That's my planned trip, so to speak. But this year Kansas was already in the cards. But Pennsylvania's got a lot of exciting stuff, man.
We're just so diversified. We're
Mhm.
pretty darn lucky. And the other part of it before we escape on another tangent, the public land opportunity. If somebody wants to start hunting, or when I see somebody say I don't have a place to hunt, we take it for granted how many opportunities you have, whether it's the land that we own, the Game Commission and the hunters, the state game lands, whether it's our private land folks that are cooperators and, or, our
state forest.
Yeah.
And I
our
didn't
sister
realize there
agencies.
was as many cooperators as there are, like landowners that, and I didn't realize that until just recently. I was looking around some areas that I hunt and saw a different color on the map. I was on the PA Game Commission map that you guys have, and I was really looking for like clear cuts and, burns and stuff like that as I was going out to scout in different places. And I started seeing, I think it was this purple color pop up, and I was like, what is this purple color? And I kind of I think it was purple. Don't quote me on that, but I was looking and I was like, oh, this is walk-in access essentially, right? It's like it's very similar to what you would have in Kansas with walk-in, permission. You still need to go up and I think, if I'm not mistaken, go talk to the landowner and say
you have to get permission.
Yeah, and go up to them and say,
it
hey,
depends.
access.
There's some where it's like a water authority may own it, or commercial timberlands who are signed up. Those you're allowed to just, because there's no point of contact. You can just go on and hunt. But if it's a private farm, you should still get permission.
Right, and that's what I was looking at, some private farms that were around where I typically hunt, where I was like, this wouldn't be a bad area because I know there's some good deer here. They might be spending some time over here during rut or whatever the case was. Or it had like a really nice little hedgerow into like a block of timber where I'm like, ooh, nice little pinch point, So I was kind of scoping some of those out. But you brought up an interesting point, whether it's like water authority or whatever the case is. There's a lot of township kind of, parcels, especially in and around where I live, and I'm always curious, like, are you able to hunt those? Is there a way how do you get access to those? Or is that just kind of like a little bit of a Bermuda Triangle to a degree when it comes to hunting?
What you need to do is actually just check with the township. So some townships allow hunting, some allow hunting by permit, and some don't. And some of them break out their parcels, depending on which parcel it is. Like if it's not suitable for hunting, they may not allow it. But if it's a wooded tract or something like that, they might let people on there. So I would suggest people would just, check in. Same thing with county-owned properties as well. Now, some of those are actually enrolled in our public access program. Not a lot of them, but sometimes, counties do enroll, and then they don't have to really worry anything. You'll see like a game commission sign. Right. Similar to like what would be on a game lands. And that would also be on those water authorities and, the timber company lands and stuff like that as well. If you see a game commission sign, there's pretty good chance that land is enrolled in one of our access programs.
Right. Isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it like 7 million acres or six?
I was just going to ask, like, how much, or do we have in public land, or where do we rank in terms of like the states?
I do not know I know, the Game Commission has over 1.5 million acres, and I think there's over 2 million acres of state forest. And the ANF's over 500,000 acres. And
that's national forest.
Yeah, that's national forest.
And I think there's close to 2 million of hunter access properties.
Yeah.
So it's, right around that number. And, I don't know where we rank, especially east of the Mississippi, but it's pretty strong.
Right. Yeah.
And especially like the state game lands that are heavily managed for wildlife. You know, and so many folks confuse state game lands and state forests.
Right.
And there's a big difference.
Yeah. And I can tell, I've been fortunate. I've had access to private land and I've hunted a lot of it. But over the last few years, especially like as you go north further in Pennsylvania, there's actually less hunting pressure on our state lands than there are in a lot of the private lands. Shh. You can edit that right out. But like I was shocked by that. I've always heard that, game lands are overhunted, And, I've hunted up there a lot. I like to go up there in rifle season because like you said, your boundaries are almost limitless. So, you can park, go out and still hunt all day long and never have to worry about where you're going because it's a huge chunk of land that you have access to. And as soon as you get off the road, like within sight of the road, you just don't see anybody. And I mean,
Yeah.
nobody.
We went turkey hunting the first Monday of the season this year. The first Monday on public ground. Didn't see a soul, and never left a goblin turkey till we had to get
to it to leave.
we
Yeah.
had to go.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and the same thing happened the previous, the year before, same thing. Like you get up there, and as long as you're willing to walk, you don't have to walk that far. Like
Mhm.
you think, oh my gosh, I have to walk 7 miles in. No, you don't. Like if you can walk a half mile,
Right.
or put some terrain between you, either climb or go over and drop down,
Mhm.
you're probably going to be by yourself.
Yeah, just like you said, e-scout or snipe your buddy's ideas or his spots on his phone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was headed north, going up to the Poconos was that, because I got some good stuff around me, but I do live in a populated area. You know what I mean? So I'm going to get, more pressure than the average bear probably, right? Just by proximity, right? So I just adjust, right? So what I end up doing is I end up hunting a lot more mornings before work and stuff like that. And I'm fortunate to where I can go in a little bit late. My boss was super cool. Even with this new gig that I have, he was like, hey, if you need to go hunt in the morning, just send an email and say you're going to be in at 11. So
just asterisk COVID it. You're good.
Right. But, so I'll try to do some of that where I'll try to hunt in the morning or whatever before work during the week. That way I'm getting in whenever there aren't other people there, and I kind of stay out of spots on weekends or whatever. But that was partially why I was headed up, north a little bit, because I had suspected lower population density, larger parcels of land means I should have more room between me and somebody else, whatever the case is. And then I confirmed that. I saw a couple guys that were scouting, or not scouting, they were walking up there where I was at. And I just stopped being neighborly and was like, how you fellas doing? And they said, good. What are you up here for? I was like, oh, I'm up here scouting for deer. And they're like, oh, get some pressure for rifle season. And I was like, okay. I was like, how about bow hunting? How about archery season? He's like, oh, archery season and turkey. He's like, you won't see a soul, and I was like, all right. I was like, sounds good. So I'm at the right spot then,
Right.
and I think that's the misconception. I think, there's adventure and fun to be had out there if you're willing to just go look for it a little bit,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
that's the part that I really like. And I think the audience of this podcast particularly are all kind of that kind of mindset. It's like, we want to find the adventure. We don't expect it just to come to us, and I think, I don't know. And I think that that's one thing for me. I'll put it this way. Like, Pennsylvania's sharpened my skills. When I go out of state and hunt, I feel like I'm ahead, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, and I was talking to Steve Bartilla one time. I had him on this show, and he literally said, he was like, I think some of the best hunters, he's like, that I know and have ever met, he's like, come from Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. He's like, those 3 states. He's like, if you can kill deer there, he's like, you go anywhere else. He's like, it's just, it's a more target rich environment. You know what I mean? And I've definitely I've hunted enough states now that where it's like, I've definitely have experienced that, where it's like, I feel like hunting here has made me a much smarter and better hunter when I go other places.
I agree with that 100%. One thing I wanted to just hit on what you said about, and I honestly think, and I'm guilty of this myself, and I think it's something we have to think about when it comes to introducing new people to hunting. And
good point.
My daughter's 20 years old, and I've spoiled her when it comes to hunting. Like, she loved to hunt turkeys, but to me, I was always measuring success and pulling the trigger. And instead of teaching her how to, at a young age, like my dad taught me and his dad taught him how to be a hunter first. And I think that's the important thing. It's, we always want to measure success, and it's great. I mean, that's the end all.
You go out to do that.
Right. But we're missing a lot of steps in between that I think are so important to new hunters.
Right.
For instance, I use this a whole lot. I mean, if you took 10, 14-year-old hunters that that have been out a couple of years, go out and say, show me a white oak.
Right.
I think it would surprise us how many wouldn't know the difference in what tree and what, just that simple woodsmanship that we learned at a young age. Sometimes we forget because of technology. There's, you want to learn how to deer hunt, you can
listen to a podcast or go on YouTube or whatever.
And it's going to, or learn how to turkey hunt. And all of a sudden you're lucky, or harvest one or kill one, whatever you want to say. The first time you're out there, you think, I know it all.
Right.
But there's so much more that we got to teach. And being a hunter isn't just pulling the trigger. And I think that's one of the mistakes, and I'm guilty of it, that we make. We got to remember that you're out there where those animals live every day. They're in their house. We didn't learn how to drive a car as soon as we learned how to walk. I mean, there's steps that have to be taken, and if we all can just put on the brakes a little bit or push in the clutch and think, maybe I need to take a different approach to this when we're introducing somebody new.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not called shooting or killing. It's called hunting, just
Right.
like fishing. If it was catching, we'd all quit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I always say, man, if you want to, have a new perspective on hunting and maybe gain a deeper appreciation for it than you already have, like, I'm pretty into hunting, right? I took a buddy, I guess it was 2 years ago, who never hunted in his life. He fished, he likes to fish, but he's never hunted in his life. He didn't grow up in a hunting family. He's shot like clay pigeons and stuff before. So he had handled a shotgun and stuff like that. And so turkey hunting was like an easy introduction for him. Like, cause it was like, all right, we can go out and turkey hunt. Cause it wasn't like deer hunting where it's like, all right, we got to get him into a saddle or something, right? There was like just a higher barrier to entry. I had a shotgun he could use, all that kind of stuff.
There's a lot of boredom in deer hunting. There's a lot of times that are doldrums that there's nothing going on.
Yeah. And it was the smallest things. I got super excited. One, because I was watching him just get pumped up about stuff that I take for granted every time I walk into the woods. It was as simple as this. We got to where we were going to hunt. A buddy of my buddy Wilson, again, awesome turkey hunter. He had some private permission on this one piece, and he was like, there's usually birds there. He's like, I roosted a couple there. He's like, there should be birds there. We'll hunt there. And he's an awesome caller. So we ended up going there, super foggy morning. We get out and we get ready to walk in. And my buddy Trevor didn't tell me this until afterwards, because at first he was like, we're going to walk in there. I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's freaking dark out here. Like, cause he's not like, cause he lives like in Antler, so, and he's like, and he moved back here. He's from New York originally, I think around the Finger Lakes, but he lived in LA for a bunch of years. So he's used to like the light pollution and stuff like that. And he's like, dude, it is dark out here. Like
Bigfoot lives in
yeah,
there.
he's like, we're going to walk in there in the dark. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, I got a headlamp. We're good. You know what I mean? He's like, we'll keep it on like red, so it's a little bit more dim or whatever. And it wasn't until like we got back from the hunt that, and it wasn't a long walk. It was maybe 200 yards or whatever to where we were going to set up 300 yards tops. And that was adventure for him. Just that walk.
Sure.
Because he was doing it in the dark and he'd never done that before. He heard sounds he'd never heard before. Once it broke daylight, we heard a gobble. A fox rolled up to about 15 yards from us. He'd never seen that before. It was like all these things that I take for granted. I'm watching him and he's like, did you see that? He's like, there was a fox right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I see him all, you know what I mean? But it's like, I see him all the time when I'm out bow hunting or whatever. But for him, it was like, he might as well have been on a different planet.
Yeah, we take a lot of things for granted. I've got lots of similar things like that's happened to me, and it's just, you take that stuff for granted, but that's what we have to teach and let new hunters get the feel of. You know, not just about the end result, the whole process, and what it will do. It'll, I know as a 12, we couldn't hunt when I was growing up. We couldn't hunt till we were 12.
Yeah, same.
So I couldn't wait to be one of those people. And I tried everything. I shot at lots of things with my slingshot that I shouldn't have shot.
Same.
I'm gonna. Now that I work for the Game Commission, I'm going to plead.
Good, Alex, you're so good to come
I'm
clean.
way out of statute of limitations on any of that stuff. But that's how we learned, and we learned what a white oak was. We learned what pokeberries were. We learned what grapevines were.
Right.
We went and caught crayfish in the creek and figured out the best rocks to catch those crayfish, and that's how we grew up hunting.
Yeah.
And we didn't get in a box blind over a green field
Right.
with a rifle. I mean, it's just, we didn't do that.
Well, and the thing you have to remember too is everybody hunts like for different reasons. Like last fall, I was mule deer hunting in Montana with a friend of mine, my wife, and my stepson, her son. And my friend Bill and I both killed deer, and my wife and her son were out hunting together, and we heard them shooting, and they came back in and they're just hysterically laughing. And it ended up this big buck walked right down the coulee to them, and they missed it at like 20 yards. And I had them, one of the things that I had said is make sure you pick your brass up because I reload. And when they were picking up their brass after they missed, they both picked up live shells. So like, not only did they miss it, they were ejecting live rounds. And like my friend Bill said, he goes, and like they just like had the greatest time with this, and they were just like reliving it and laughing and like almost in tears. And Billy goes, oh my God. He's like, I don't know what's wrong with him. If that happened to me, I'd grab this handle of whiskey, walk out onto the prairie and freeze to death. He's like, I couldn't live with this. But I just talked to her about it at dinner on Friday night, and she's like, "Oh my God, that was like the greatest day." And they didn't kill anything.
Yeah.
But they still talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure that we don't put our expectations of a successful hunt on somebody else,
That's a
because
great point.
everybody hunts for different reasons.
Yeah.
And one guy might want to go drink himself to death. The other person, it was like the greatest opportunity they ever had.
I'm not letting Dave Mitchell fool me, though. I took him to Alabama this January, and Alabama used to be you could shoot a buck and a doe a day.
Right.
Now there's a little bit less liberal limits, but Dave was running out of bullets by the end, let me tell you.
Yeah. Now, I want to go to Alabama is one of those places that's on my list to go to, because I want to go hunt the rut at like a really weird time, because they got like 5 ruts.
Well, like January.
Yeah. Because like when I'm done here, you know what I mean? Like, well, I mean, we got late season, but like when my rut's done, it's like I would love to go to Alabama.
How fun is the rut in January?
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, you're in like a hoodie because it's 60 degrees.
You don't wear no long johns.
Right.
And they are rutting like the middle of November here. They're just grunting and chasing and running, and there's pigs and deer and oh boy.
Well, and when we talked about cagey deer, how Pennsylvania's deer are cagey. Those deer come out with spots on them, and they're the cagiest deer you've ever seen. Like,
really?
You slow a truck down by a deer that you see in the woods, and it's a fawn. And you're like, and there's nobody. There's been no people around it. It's just and
they have some good deer there too.
Yes, they do.
They've got some good. It's a little. I have a couple buddies that live there, and I've seen some of the deer that came out there. I actually did a video shoot for a client there. I was there for a couple of days. I forget what part of Alabama I was in now off the top of my head, but it was actually this old. Not an old house, but it was like a really nice kind of like estate. Like a family had passed away and left the estate to like something, and they use it for events now and stuff like that. But they had like mounts up in the in the main living area or whatever. And the guy who runs the property was there, and I saw those mounts. So of course, me as a deer hunter, the first thing I said when I walked in, I was like, "Where'd they shoot those?" He's like, "Oh, back here." And I was like, "You gotta be kidding me!" And there was like a 150 over here and like a 160 over here, and I was like, man, Alabama's got some decent deer in this area. And he's like, oh yeah, he hunted too. And so we started talking. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, there's some gem spots around here that are just be hard pressed to find better.
Alabama's a great example of what happens when your deer population gets out of control, though, because I mean, in a lot of those places they need to shoot a lot more does, and it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just overpopulated. How are our deer numbers
here?
Yeah, for PA.
I think they are. I think
you're gonna need a helmet.
Yeah, I think they're as high as they've ever been in the time that I've been deer hunting.
And he's talking statewide.
I'm talking
now, when he talks statewide, that's a hard thing for people to comprehend,
right? Because
and one of the reasons for that is, when I go in the woods, I look at things a little bit differently than a lot of people do. And when you look at the amount of browse pressure that you can see, it shows a very healthy and growing herd.
And we had a pretty bad winter this year.
Yeah, we did have it. And so I don't know what it's like today, but like last fall, it was, I hunted a lot of different, like not a lot, but several different locations. And I personally saw a lot of deer, and I know a lot of the public land that I spend time on. Believe it or not, there's probably more browse pressure on our game lands up north than there is on our game lands here in the southeast. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One could be a little bit site conditions, growing conditions. Like we can take a little bit more browse pressure because of the type of forests that we have here. But the other one is there's so much hunting pressure that I believe that we're able to harvest a pretty decent number of deer. Like the areas that you hunt down in Bucks County, they were some of the healthiest forests in the state because we started bonus tags back in the late 80s, and those game lands were getting hammered for 20 years where, they just like shot doe after doe after doe after doe on them. And because of that, we were able to have those really good healthy forests. But once you have a really good healthy forest, suddenly you have really good quality food, and now your deer are healthier. They're producing more fawns, and you can still have that good healthy deer population. So our deer numbers in pretty much everywhere I've been in the state, I think are strong. There's definitely huntable numbers as long as you're in good habitat.
Right. Yeah. Goes back to what we kind of started the conversation with, right? It's like you got to seek out where that good habitat is. It's going to hold deer, because there's a lot of critters that live there beyond deer, and they all need slightly different things. And so the forests are kind of there to kind of, provide those different things for the things that are going to live there.
Yeah, but I think we're going to have a great year this year.
I do too.
One of the things that we're going to have this year is concurrent seasons during firearms season this year.
That's been a hot topic. That was one of the things I got. That was a question on here from a listener who had a question about that. So
right. And everybody thinks that we're going to decimate the deer herd, and that is not the goal. The goal is to provide opportunity for hunters, and we handle population control by how many antlerless licenses that we issue. So if you want to kill 1,000 deer and you have a week-long season, maybe you need to issue 4,000 licenses. If you want to kill 1,000 deer and you have a 2-week season, maybe you need to issue 3,000 licenses. So we'll adjust those license numbers accordingly to get the harvest that we want.
Right.
And it's just going to provide more opportunity for people who maybe only have those first couple days of the season to hunt, and it gives them an opportunity to kill that.
And
doe.
there's kind of a misnomer about the last time that concurrent went out, and that was to reduce the deer numbers.
Right.
And that was the mission of that concurrent season.
Absolutely.
And this concurrent season, that's not the mission. The mission is, like Dave said, is
opportunity.
It's purely opportunity. There are some areas that, CWD areas.
My home,
your
Bedford,
home, hometown, where we are trying to reduce numbers there to try to slow the spread of that terrible disease.
Right.
But if you look at the agency as a whole over the last few years, we've been all about trying to provide more opportunity for hunters where we can. So the fall turkeys that Matt talked about, that was something where we had to bring that back because it was the right thing to do, because we were concerned about our turkey population numbers. But if you look at the expanded bear hunting opportunities that have been out over the last few years, we've given people a lot of opportunity to hunt black bears, and by all accounts, that population is doing very well. The expanded elk hunting opportunities. We have dove fields now, which are an amazing, fun thing. I don't know if you've experienced them at all.
I have. I'm terrible at dove hunting. I'm terrible at all bird hunting. We'll just put it there.
But part of dove hunting is the best is smelling gunpowder.
Right.
Yeah,
Who cares if you
yeah,
hit one?
it's all trigger time.
Now,
That's right.
the snow goose number got reduced, like per day take. Did it or did it not?
I would have to look at well, it depends on what season you're talking about. The Canada goose season got reduced. In the Atlantic population, they went from 3 to 2 to 1 this year. So
that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the snow goose numbers, I believe, are not, but the Canada, and that's because of the migratory birds. So in southeastern Pennsylvania, you have a really large resident flock, but those Atlantic population birds, you can't tell the difference. So when you're out hunting, you don't know if you're killing resident birds or migratory birds. So they had to reduce the numbers.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
But what the agency tries to do is we try to provide like Matt said, we are hunters, and we know that hunters are they're our constituents, and we want to use hunting as that management tool. And if we can provide opportunity without hurting the population, we want to do it.
Look at the early squirrel season.
Yeah.
What a better way to get someone involved in hunting. A
yeah.
good squirrel hunter can go anywhere in the country and chase deer or turkeys or whatever. If somebody learns, it just teaches you everything: marksmanship, how to read the woods, what
they're feeding
needs.
on.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've tried to provide those opportunities while we can,
Right.
But sometimes we have to take something back, and nothing's meant to be forever. You have an opportunity to do something, but then when conditions change, we may have to pull back opportunities, but we may be able to give more opportunities somewhere else. So it's a constant ebb and flow based on wildlife populations.
Right. And that's why it's referred to as management. Because it's not, you don't set it and forget it. It's like these things take care, right? And these decisions aren't made willy-nilly, right? It's debated. There's science that's used to back it, right? It's like that's the thing I think people have to recognize, that there's carrying capacities, right, that different habitats have that you have to look at, right? And when you talk to your biologists and stuff like that, they get a sense of what the landscape can hold per species, right? what the amount you need to remove from the landscape to make sure that those animals are not dying of starvation or whatever, or decimating the habitat that's being used by a bunch of other things. It's like, and then you come to a number to be able to remove the amount of animals you need to remove, or the amount of, animals from that species that you need to remove to have a balanced ecosystem, right? Because that's kind of the thing I think that people forget about, hunters as well as non-hunters, because, a lot of times non-hunters are into preservation, not so much conservation, right? It's like, but we're past the preservation aspect of it because we have so much human intrusion everywhere that you have to actively manage it. You have to actively participate in providing the habitat or the reduction in numbers or whatever the case is. So they have something that resembles what would be nature, but it will never be natural per se, right? Because there's too much human intrusion at this point.
Right. And when you think about human intrusion, and something that people don't look at, but the amount of invasive species, especially plant species, and what's happened to our native forests. When you look, and a lot of this comes back to there's too many deer, but when you see an understory that has barberry and autumn olive and bush honeysuckle, none of those things are native. But the reason they're here is because people either planted them for cover because deer didn't eat them, or they escaped from somebody's landscaping and they start to take over. And then you get, like mile a minute vine, which grows everywhere, and Japanese stokegrass, which will choke out the forest. You get all these things, and most people just go out and they're like, oh, it's green, it must be good.
Right.
But all wildlife, all those 480 species evolved with certain types of foods and certain type of habitats that they had to live in. And as we're altering it and changing that, when people say, well, do nothing, just leave it alone.
We're past that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I laugh at that because at my place, I have a little piece and they were showing me all the invasives that were at my place. I'm like, well, it's green. They're going to eat it. And a dang deer won't touch any of it. Looks great.
Yeah.
But it's not palatable to a deer unless they're starving to death.
Yeah.
Then maybe, I don't know.
Just to put something in their gut, like to not feel hungry, maybe it might be at some point.
You
right?
go to Saskatchewan where it's 30 below zero and they're eating tree bark all winter to survive. And, making it through those winters isn't easy.
Yeah. That's why it's like, my father-in-law or my dad or whatever, when they'll ask me like, hey, what should we do with this old field that's over here? Like, what should I put in it? I used to want to put a food plot in it or whatever, and that would be usually my go-to. And now I'm like, let's burn it. Let's just burn it and let nature come back.
And people don't realize, like, one of the things, like you asked me about the crew at Blue Marsh who got that award, the Phillips Award. So we're converting that from largely row crops to native habitats. And native habitats are native grasses and forbs. Well, forbs is just a fancy name for wildflowers.
Right.
So a lot of your wildflowers, and that can be anything from, goldenrod to black-eyed Susans. But when you start doing research on those wildflowers, they're very high in digestible protein, super high in digestible protein.
Yep.
So people are like, well, it's nothing but a bunch of weeds. Well, it's a bunch of weeds to you, but to that deer that's out there eating in it, it's tailor-made for it. It grew up, it evolved for hundreds of years eating those quote-unquote weeds. It didn't grow up eating soybeans and alfalfa. It grew up eating those weeds.
Yeah.
And
not just deer, though. Turkeys and songbirds.
Songbirds and everything.
Bees.
Yeah.
It's the whole ecosystem. But when you look at a meadow, so my wife and I have a small piece of property that I've done some management on, and the deer were eating all these different flowers. So I took a very small area, it's probably the size of this room, and I fenced it with just a 4-foot high fence to allow these Jerusalem artichokes I planted to grow up. Mm-hmm. This is in the middle of a 3-acre meadow. I just walked by there yesterday, and inside that fence, the goldenrod and all the other forbs are about a foot higher than outside the fence. Mm-hmm. And that's just from deer being in there browsing on everything. But without that exclusionary area, just like Latham's Acre, you would never notice it.
Right.
And that there native meadow is probably providing more forage, more natural, more tonnage. It doesn't cost me anything than the food plot that I have planted up on the hill with, soybeans and lab and stuff in it.
Yeah.
Which is like going out for ice cream.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me to swallow because I came from the food, like, we're putting this clover out. This is doing great things. And it is, but it's attracting deer there because it's like,
That put his kid through college, so that was a bitter pill to swallow. He could have just stood up there and said, "Don't do anything, just leave everything alone, burn it 3 times every third year."
Right.
So I'm learning. I'm learning the hard way.
It's all right, man. We all have to learn the
That's
hard way
right.
at some point, But, man, I've kept you guys hostage here for about an hour and a half. I want to be sensitive to your time because I know we started this late. You guys were accommodating my work schedule so I could get out here later in the evening. But, before we shut this thing down, I want to give you guys a chance to let people know where they can find out more about the Pennsylvania Game Commission, all the things you guys are doing, all the ways you guys are communicating with hunters, where you want them to follow you or be engaged with you. And that to remind folks that license sales have opened and you can hit the new fancy website. I liked it. And get yourself some tags. So if you wouldn't mind, just let folks know where they can find out more info.
Well, obviously, you can always check out our website, pgc.pa.gov. Everything that we got going on is usually on our website for sure. If you're social media, we're Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Getting ready to start a TikTok.
Oh,
we're
Matt Morett dances. Is
no,
that what's going on?
No, I can't dance. I can't dance, sing it. No, the only thing I can do halfway good is yelp on a turkey call. Not even that might be up for debate anymore. But any of the social media channels. Here's my biggest advice. In this whole country, there's 11.5 million hunters. In Pennsylvania, we have almost 900,000. We almost have a tenth of the hunters in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in this together. Bottom line is hunters, the Game Commission, conservation agencies, we're all in this together. And the more that we can work together and the more we can grease the wheel and be smooth and have understandings of what's going on, we're not always right. We're human. We make mistakes. And we're able to admit that. But we might have to give something a try sometime. But the better we can stay in touch with all of us, the better the future is going to be. And that's the most important thing that we have to look at. We can't look at tomorrow necessarily. We got to look a little bit farther than that. In the world that we live in today, everybody wants something to happen now. Now, there's things that can happen now. But, when we can look in the future, make better opportunities, and make sure that hunting and trapping stays around for a long time. That's our goal.
And that we continue to have the strong heritage that we have.
Absolutely.
It'll look different 50 years from now. Everything will, right?
You'll still have Woolrich. You'll still have Woolrich black and red,
right?
In the back of your mind. That's right. Our goal. And we're open lines. I mean, reach out. Let's talk about it. You might not agree with it, but let's figure it out how we can work together, and maybe we can help you understand some of the decisions that are made. And trust me when I say this, and I say this as with chill bumps, with goosebumps, we are hunters at the Game Commission. I can speak for Dave and on this one. Like if something doesn't feel right, trust me, it's not just a gavel on the table and this is how it is. There's a lot of thought process. Nothing happens fast.
Right.
In the Pennsylvania Game Commission for the most part.
And speaking about some of those answers, if you're looking for them, one of the things Matt didn't talk about was our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing a really good job of putting informational, short, 5-6 minute clips on why we've done things or how to do something. So that's another good thing to look at.
We have Ask PGC on our website, which is a lot of the questions that I'm sure came through on your social channels. Those answers are right there. And, the biggest thing that I can say is be a little bit more investigative if you have something. There's no reason nowadays with all the information that's out there, because like we'll put a post up right now. We had one of the pieces of legislation we're trying to help is the pink envelope antlerless deer application. Okay, yes, we are a little bit archaic. Yes, you still have to write a check out. These kids. My kid doesn't have a checkbook. She has no idea what a check is. If it's not plastic,
right,
or green, she doesn't know what it is. But the only way we can fix it is we need everybody to get involved and go to their legislator. And we put a post out a couple weeks ago when we're trying to gain, and everybody understand how this works. And the first 20 comments were like, "Yeah, you guys need to fix this. We're trying to. We're asking for your help."
Right.
So just dig a little deeper into when you're doing that, and yeah, you might not like us, but we have to work together because we're all in this together.
Well, it's like anything, the old man always told me, it's like, don't show up to the party with the problem, show up with a potential solution.
I thought you were going to tell me the old bull, young bull story, but we'll save that for another day.
Well, with that, fellas, I appreciate you. I appreciate you guys having me out here. I hope this is the first of many that we get to kind of get together and hang out. Enjoying my time here, and Always a good time talking deer hunting and hunting in general. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, it's very good. Thanks.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those two things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.